Hello everybody, I am Jarrett Ross, the Genie Vlogger, and welcome back to another Professional Genealogist Reacts. On today's video, I will be reacting to Ethnically Ambiguous Woman Shocked by DNA Test Results by Lady Decade. Now this is not a channel I'm familiar with. Took a look through her channel, and it's all about video games and like retro games too, which is actually right up my alley, so I may end up checking out her channel later on. But looking over her videos to see if there's anything that might indicate what her known ancestry is, I couldn't find anything, so just basing off of how she looks, to me she kind of looks like she may be a mixture of South Asian, so Indian, Pakistan, something like that, and maybe like a European or Middle Eastern sort of mixture. I'm not quite sure, but that was kind of the look that I got from her look, but obviously ambiguous. So I'm not really going to say anything else because we could be expecting all sorts of stuff. So let's jump into it.
Something that I'm constantly asked about is, where are you from? What's your ethnicity? Like, I think a lot of people think that I might be Indian because I've covered Indian gaming history.
Interesting that she would say that right off the bat, although she's saying because she's covering Indian gaming history. Not quite what I said, but she does, to me, she looks very Indian, Pakistan, South Asian.
I suppose I'm quite a racially ambiguous person. I can arrive in like quite a few countries and people will speak to me in their local language and then won't realise to begin with that perhaps I don't speak their language because I'm not one of them. I'm not one of you. I thought that it would be a good idea to find out what I'm made up of. I've got a bit of an idea as to what my ethnicity is because like I know where my mum's from, I know where my dad's from, but then I suppose you see a lot of these like DNA like results videos and people are always like shocked. They're always like, oh my god, I'm this, I had no idea, blah 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 blah.
I wonder who she tested with. I don't think she's said it at this point, but one thing I was thinking about is that this video is from 8 months ago. So being recent, the results should be fairly updated. Maybe there's a new update since. If she did MyHeritage, they'll be updated soon because MyHeritage is doing an update sometime soon. They haven't announced when yet, but they've announced that it'll be coming during the summer of this year.
So without further ado, let's open the packet and pull out my phone.
Coming out from a different angle.
My phone right here, which has my results on. And I say that, I've actually got a laptop here. It's already open. I've already read the results.
Oh, man. You're just ruining it.
To be honest with you, before I tell you what my results are, I was actually, at one of the results, genuinely shocked. I could not believe one of these results. And when I tell you it, I'll explain why it shocked me. And do you know what? By the end of this video, if you yourself, whether you're in America, whether you're in Australia or New Zealand or Canada or wherever, and you have got some similar results to me, and you're sitting there thinking, why on earth is it saying that I've got DNA from that country? I'm hoping that by the end of this video, you will have an understanding that's a little bit more clear, because I've done loads of research over the last few days since I got these results, and now like my world history knowledge has just gone whoosh.
I'm really hopeful with what she's saying right now because she started out being like, oh, I was really shocked by this, but I'll explain why. And with a lot of these videos, sometimes it is shocking stuff like, wow, that would be very unexpected. But a lot of times it's stuff that's just like, not as shocking once you realize the world history and flow of population groups and the connections between those groups. So like, a big one that we see on the channel is Northwestern European, and people who think, oh, well, I have all this English ancestry, I don't know anything other than England, they're going to test, and then they're going to get a bunch of stuff from that Northwestern European group that's going to surprise them. Most especially Scandinavian is a big one that comes in that Northwestern European group that, people who are English, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, whatever, a lot of them will do the test and get that and be like, what? Scandinavian? But it's really just kind of that Northwestern group. So what she's saying makes me think that she, if she did research, she learned about learning the world history to understand the DNA results. That makes me hopeful. So let's continue.
58.2% Irish / Scottish / Welsh. You might be sitting there thinking, why is she so shocked? What is so shocking about all of that? It's not the fact that there's Irish and Welsh there, because I kind of knew that. I knew that because I've got grandparents who both told me that that's where they're from. But when you look at my DNA results as an entirety, there's no English. None at all. So I've got this segment which is saying Irish, Scottish and Welsh. And then I've got 2 other segments which are saying other things. But then when you look at the full breakdown, it says English, 0%. And I was thinking, how can there be 0%? I've lived in England my whole life, and I've got generations of family who have lived in England going back for many, many years.
So basically just like what I was talking about, the whole Northwestern European thing, I was talking about an even wider gap of Scandinavia, Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales, all of that. Now we're talking about something even closer. And it's really funny when you talk about England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, because every single company seems to do it differently. You have Living DNA, which does the most nuanced breakdown of things, which I do actually hear from a lot of people that even live in England that are like, actually, Living DNA seems to match up pretty well with what I know of my family. And they're giving, granular details of not just, England or Ireland, or whatever. They're going to be like, you're actually in this county, or, you're down here in the Cornwall area, you're over here in the Manchester area, and giving that in the admixture breakdowns.
Looking at that breakdown, the Irish and the Welsh parts do make sense to me. I've got one nan who is Welsh, and my other nan, her mother was from Ireland, but we don't know anything about her father.
So that's 25% Welsh, 12.5% Irish that she knows of. Just doing the breakdown because she's saying one nan, I assume, is grandparent, and then her other nan's parents, so that'd be 12.5%, a great-grandparent.
I've got family members who have lived in England going back generations and generations and generations. How can they possibly live in England but not be English? And I think if you take a look at the word England, it's actually, in the grand scheme of things, a much newer word. So if you roll back the clock and go back to before the Romans arrived in England, you actually had the umbrella term for all of the people being here being the Celts. I think that's probably a word that everyone has heard of, the Celts. So that's basically an umbrella term for all of the people that lived around the British Isles. England wasn't a thing back then. You didn't have England, you didn't have Scotland, you didn't have Wales. That all happened much later down the road of time.
That's such a great point, and something that really ties into a lot of the issues that we have with people trying to interpret the DNA test results, because these DNA test results are these companies trying to take this really complicated data of trying to figure out population groups and put it in an easily digestible form of information for the layman, the random consumer. Well, what is that? It's how you know the world, which is the country lines that define it today. But DNA doesn't care about borders. And especially when you're looking at areas that have been redefined over and over and over in terms of who's governing that area and what population groups make up a large part of that population and the connections between those, you can understand why there's such a major difficulty in deciphering some of these regions and getting much more granular results. But still with that, the companies still have to put it in some way that's understandable. And so you get these country lines, but just like she's saying, you have to understand the history to really get a good idea.
You had the Celts living in England, you had the arrival of the Roman Empire, and then after the Roman Empire left, the next grand thing to happen would be the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons. Now, the Anglo-Saxons is made up of 2 different groups of people. The Saxons themselves are a Germanic race of people from basically North Germany, and then the Angles are basically from Denmark. They would come over, they would move into different parts, and then as time moved on, they would become one people. You would then get invasions from Norwegian people, also known as Vikings. From that point onwards, you would see, with the arrival of all of these different people, the people who were already in Britain, essentially the Celts, or another term for them I think is literally Britons, were then being moved. They were displaced out and would either go north into Scotland, where there was already people who lived naturally in Scotland. They would go into Wales or cross the water into Ireland, where there was already Irish people already there who had been there since the Ice Age. They would move into Cornwall. If anyone's watching this who is from Cornwall, the Cornish people, that's actually like their own proper ethnicity. Okay, so with the Anglo-Saxons, the east of England, the majority of the south of England, and obviously East Anglia was the territory that they predominantly lived in. You'll probably notice that East Anglia, Anglo. There's also England, comes from the word Anglo as well. The reason that I'm not myself holding any of this Anglo-Saxon blood is because when I actually spoke with my family about this and said to them, wait a second, where did everybody live before we lived here? My family that I would have assumed were Anglo-Saxon were actually from the Cotswolds. Now the Cotswolds, when you look at a map of England, basically more or less bordering Wales or a little bit into Wales, basically is West Country. And it's an area that when you look at all of the old maps and territories that belonged to, for example, either the Britons / Celts or the Anglo-Saxons, that area would have literally been a Celt area. That makes sense to me. And then obviously my nan, who was Welsh anyway, would have remained within that sort of area. I also noticed that my family have only really lived in East Anglia since about the 60s. So that makes sense. It would make sense why I can live in this area but not have any actual Anglo-Saxon blood. Moving swiftly on, the part that you were all waiting for. Why am I brown?
Racial. So
It says that I am 12.5% Scandinavian. Well, that's easy to explain because that's literally just Vikings, isn't it? The Vikings went in everywhere. So I'm basically 12.5% Viking / Norse, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the Anglosphere probably are. Not really much to say on that, and that's literally just covers the same ground as what I just spoke about for like the last 10 minutes of this video. It says that I am 2.3% Greek
I knew it!
/ South Italian, which is basically Roman Empire, explains that more or less. But yeah, so for all of you people out there who have asked me, am I Greek? Basically saying that I look like Marina Sirtis, you was 2% correct.
2% correct.
Not that it's all that important, but it says that I am 0.8% Mesoamerican / Andean. I'm not really sure how that factors into things.
It's hard to keep up with all the percentages because she's not showing them on the screen, but assuming that she does have some sort of an Asian ancestry, because I think there's still a big chunk we're waiting to hear about. If that is the case, this Mesoamerican Andean may be a representation of just kind of a misread in a sense of that, because there's that connection between Indigenous Americans and Asians. So there's sometimes those misreads that happen, but there is also the possibility that somewhere in her ancestry there was some Native American ancestor who had children with someone that then she descends from. We'll have to see what she gets for the rest of the reading.
So, the part that you've all been waiting for. Why is she brown? Why is she brown?
Might as well.
You
Get
get
on
on
with
with
it,
it,
yeah. Right.
I am 26.2% South Asian, specifically Sri Lankan, and then basically my granddad was Tamil. So you might be wondering, who are the Tamil people? The Tamil people are the ethnic minority in Sri Lanka. Back when the British Empire was running India and a lot of the Asian subcontinent, the Tamil people tended to sort of cozy up to the British, whereas the Sinhalese, who are the ethnic majority in Sri Lanka, didn't. They didn't want to integrate. When the British Empire left Sri Lanka, the Tamil people became quite persecuted to the point of ethnic cleansing. What you'll find is that the Tamil people have sort of migrated around the world. So like there's a huge population of Tamil people in Singapore, but you'll find Tamil people everywhere. You'll find them in Britain, you'll find them in Canada, the United States. They've moved around everywhere, and according to my DNA matches on this particular website, I have indeed got blood relatives in both Canada and the United States, which is really interesting. But yes, so the Tamil people, my granddad was Hindu, and by the looks of it, like it's literally just putting me down to that one group of people, which says to me that there wasn't a lot of people marrying and having children with people who were outside of being Tamil. Hinduism there was a lot of there was a caste system, there was a lot of arranged marriages, so it makes sense to me why that bloodline there would be, I suppose, more pure. But then my granddad would have bucked the trend by, first of all, leaving Sri Lanka, and secondly, marrying a Welsh lady. But yeah, it's very interesting to finally know for sure what my heritage actually is, and be able to actually share all of that with all of you lot watching right now.
Okay, that was a pretty decent video. I wish she had shown the full breakdown of the results on screen instead of just reading it off. I know that's one of the things that always bothers me sometimes when I watch DNA results videos is, I guess, people do this and they don't really think about, oh, well, people are going to try to interpret it by looking it all together. They just think of it just in those singular chunks. It was really great that she did dive into the history of things and kind of talk about, what explains why we have this Northwestern European connection between all of these different population groups, or seemingly different population groups, but really ancestrally they're all connected very, very well. But towards the end, I was kind of a little just like, oh, she's kind of diving into that, well, and now I know everything for sure. And it's like, well, not really. You just have an admixture that does line up with what you know. So it is kind of giving you a blurry view of your ancestry, but it's not telling you about your actual ancestors and their names and their stories and what they went through and what you can actually get out of doing genealogy and building a family tree. One interesting thing to discuss as well is the Greek-Italian reading of 2 point whatever percent. I forgot exactly what it was. But why that's interesting is that is kind of an outlier for a Northwestern European reading. I don't think it's super uncommon for Southern European, Italian, Greek, Balkan sort of to sneak in there for people with Northwestern European, but it's not like a super common thing. So it could be much more representative of DNA coming from one recent Greek ancestor. And if that's the case, 2 point whatever percent that it was, then we're going to be looking at about a third great grandparent. So I say this in a lot of videos, but the typical breakdown is you get about 50% from your parents, 25% from your grandparents, 12.5% from greats, 6.25% from second greats, and then 3 point whatever the breakdown is from third greats. So the way that you look at these percentages is if you assume that it's coming from one recent ancestor and you're trying to figure out how far back it is, just look for whatever that breakdown is that's closest to it, and then you get yourself a range. So you're looking here mostly third to fourth great grandparent. Could also be a second great grandparent because the way that DNA inheritance goes, randomness of recombination, basically the randomness of what DNA you inherited, it can make it so that you get much more DNA from one ancestor versus another. And generally, if you're looking at about a third great grandparent, for a lot of people, you're looking at somebody who is going to have been born in the early 1800s, maybe mid 1800s, maybe late 1700s. And fourth great grandparents, you're looking at early 1800s, late 1700s, maybe kind of mid-late 1700s. But I think overall this video is a good example of how when you're looking at your DNA results, it is good to look much further than just what you're reading on screen and to sort of kind of dive into it, and that's going to give a much better understanding, and it kind of links everything up. I know for me, whenever I do a lot of this stuff, as soon as you start looking at the history and the population flows and stuff, and looking into people's family trees and understanding a lot of that, it all just kind of falls into place, it feels like. And from what she said, it kind of sounds like that kind of happened for her as well, of just, well, she read the results and then all of a sudden looked at the history and it's like, oh, okay, it all fits. Now, if you enjoyed this reaction and you want to see more reactions just like this, be sure to check out this one right here. Thank you to my Patreon patrons and YouTube members.